Okay, so the first virtual machine that we're going to fire up in Hyper-V is going to be our Server 2012 R2 box. Now, if you just got done watching the host setup, it's going to be very similar as far as installation is concerned. In fact, it's going to be identical. So let's get going here. Okay, so I'm on my Hyper-V box here. This is actually my Hyper-V server that I have here. It's got a bazillion gigs of RAM and it's got a ton of hard drive space in it. Just ignore these virtual machines. These are not the virtual machines you are looking for. These are ones that I use in my own production environment here at the Justice League. Yeah, I know, see, Batman reference, huh? So I'm going to go and create a new virtual machine on my Batcave. So I'm going to select New, Virtual Machine. It's going to walk me through my 4-hour wizard. 4-hour wizard, not really. I just like making people think I work a long time. I'm going to hit Next. Asks, what's the name of the machine that you'd like to create? Well, I'm going to call this one Ethical Hacking, or Server 2012. Maybe I should do R2 just in case I have another box on there called 2012. Now it's asking me also where do I want to store the virtual machines. You can store them in the default location or you can specify somewhere else. I'm going to just put them here. Actually, let's put them in a different location. I want to put them on my D drive under CEH project. I'm just going to, again, I'm a stickler for organization. So I'm going to create a folder here. I'm going to call it VMs. And this is where I'm going to put all my VMs. And it'll create a subdirectory for me named after the machine. And what this is asking for is not actually where do you want to install, but where do you want to put the configuration files that make up the virtual machine. I'm going to hit Next. It then asks what generation of Hyper-V do you want to create. Trust me on this one. Again, this is not a Hyper-V class. We're just going to take Gen 1. And it says how much memory do you want to utilize? Well, you need at least on this box here, you'd probably want to have like 4 gig. On this box, let's go ahead and just give it 248 megabit, which is 2 gigs of hard drive space or of memory. Now I know this isn't a ton of memory associated to the machine, but again, this machine is going to have, actually I take that back. Let's do 4 gig because we're going to install SQL on this box. We're going to really kind of put it to its limit here. We'll also be installing the web services on this box as well. Don't worry about the dynamic memory. We're just going to hit Next. And it says, okay, what network do you want to hook it up to? Well, you can see I've got a couple of networks here. I don't want to necessarily put it on my production environment or on my DAG network, so I'm going to put it on my hacking network because that's why I created it, so it's completely separate. I'm going to hit Next. Here's where it's saying, where do you want to put the virtual machine? The file that represents the virtual machine. You'll notice it picked up the name. The new extension now for Hyper-V is VHDX, and you'll see here that the directory it's going to create, or it's going to place it inside of CEH project, VMs, and see, I told you, it created a directory there, and it created another subdirectory, or it will create a new subdirectory called virtual hard disks, and that's good. I'm going to leave it right there. It also says how big do you want this hard drive to be. Now, the default for this is to be a dynamically expanding hard drive, meaning that even though I specify 127 gigs, it's not going to take up 127 gigs on my physical drive. The host OS will only use as much space as the file takes up. But to the virtual machine, it thinks it has 127 gig. So you can actually over allocate. And 127 is the defaults. That's fine for me. I'm going to go ahead and hit Next. And then it says, okay, we need to install an operating system because obviously this is a new machine. Do you want to install an OS later? Nope. I want to actually do this based off of an ISO. And hey, here we go with those ISOs. Remember we downloaded them? We put them here inside of our ISO directory. And there's my 2012 trial. I'm going to select Open. Hit Next. I get a summary screen. I'm going to go ahead and select Finish. It creates that virtual machine for me, and it's ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and right-click on my server, select to connect. It shows me, obviously, since the machine's off, if it was a physical box, I'd be staring at a black screen because it's not turned on. They're at least nice enough to tell me that, hey, it's currently turned off. Wish our physical boxes would show us that, right? I'm going to go ahead and select the Start button to start it up. I can also come up here and select Actions and then select Start. I could also just use the shortcut key, which is Control S. So I'm going to hit a Control S. The virtual machine should fire up, should pick up my CD or my DVD drive. Move this over so we can see this. Actually, we'll go full screen. Check this out. Shabam! Uh-oh, I'm a little off my resolution. It should fix itself, though, here. Very similar. Actually, it's not similar. It's exactly what we saw in the previous installation on the host machine. We're just going to go through the same steps. Select Next. Again, it's going to come up and say, which operating system would you like to install? Again, I'm going to just do a Server 2012 R2 Standard Evaluation Edition, but make sure you're not using Core. We're going to use the GUI. I'm going to hit Next. Accept the EULA. Again, remember, there's nothing to upgrade because it's a fresh install, so we're going to do a custom. I'm going to take the whole partition, and it's another waiting game. We'll pause the video and come back when it's finished up. Okay, so it's finished installing all of our features or updates. Again, we don't need to wait for it to reboot. Nothing magical about the green line. We'll just go ahead and reboot. Make sure you don't press a key. Oh, there we go. So again, we're going to be asking us for a password. We're going to use our top secret password. Again, if you didn't see the host setup, there it is right there. We're going to use $$$W0RD. I'm going to come down here and type that in as again. Hit finished. Okay, we're going to log in here. To log in, if you don't know the shortcut for it, you're going to have to come back to a windowed environment so that you can get to the actions. So in order to throw a Control-Delete, if you throw an actual Control-Delete, it'll throw it at the host machine, and you don't want to do that. So I'm going to come back and window this out a bit here so that I can get to my action, and I'm going to throw a Control-Delete, and there's the password. To log in. Again, we'll go back to full screen again. So I'm going to adjust the resolution down to the 1280 by 720. There we go. Keep the changes, you bet. So there's my Server 2012 R2 box up and running. Now I will see a network is not identified because I can't get out to the internet and there's no domain controller, or there's no DNS server specified at this point. So that's okay. So I'm going to fire up the Server Manager dashboard. Before we install any roles or features in this box, I'm going to go through and tweak this box just like we did our host machine. Again, notice that the default computer name is, yes, that random name. So I'm going to click on the name and come in to change the name. And this one here, I'm going to call it Server 2012. R2. I hit OK. Now you may be saying, Dale, why didn't you call it EH, ethical hacking? Because this is the ethical hacking name is only to represent itself in Hyper-V to the host machine. Once I'm inside, I don't necessarily want to call it that. I'm just going to call it like a normal server. I could have called this Server 5 or Server 12. I'm going to hit Next, though, because I don't need to, or I'm going to hit Closed. It's going to tell me I need to restart, but I'm not going to restart yet. Because if you remember, I got a couple other things I'm going to do here. First thing, I'm going to go into my IE enhancement and turn it off. And the other option I'm going to do here is I'm going to come into my control panel. Actually, if I come to right-click, if I right-click on the Start button, I can come up to my System section and go into my Advanced System Settings, and under Performance, hit the Settings button, and then go to my DEP. Remember, we're going to turn that off. I know it says it's turning it on, but I'm turning it on only for Windows, not for any other service or program that I install. I'm going to hit OK. This requires a restart as well. I'm going to hit OK. OK. And let's restart this bad boy. Tell it we're starting it for other. So I'm going to log in again. Again, I'm going to window this here just for a second. Throw Control Delete. Give our password. Again, we'll go back to full screen. You guys won't have to go through the same steps that you just saw me go through. If you notice, I've had to window twice and then expand back out twice. And I can't throw Control-Alt-End from my machine because I'm actually getting into my Batcave remotely. So it adds another layer of virtualization, or basically I'm getting into my machine remotely and then running virtualization where you guys won't have that issue. Now, again, if you come down here and you see these services, you can right-click on them. Oops, excuse me, you can left-click on them. I just like to make sure that none of them are services that's supposed to start automatically. The automatic with delay start, it just means that it hasn't fired up yet, and these eventually will fire off for me. Okay, so what we want to do next is install IIS as a web server, because it'll be one of the things that we'll try to attack. We're going to come in here into our Add Roles and Features. So I'm going to hit Next. It's going to be a role-based installation. It's going to be on my server 2012 R2 box. Notice I've got an IP address. We'll be changing this up a little bit later on as well. I'm going to hit Next. It says, okay, well, what role do you want to install? Well, the role I'd like to install is IIS. And when I select to install web server IIS, it tells me that I need to have these tools installed as well. So I'm going to add those features in. I'm going to hit Next. Now it's asking me for features specific to this particular machine. So I'm going to go through and select the following features to install. I'm going to do my back bits. I'm going to install bits. I'm going to take those as default. I'm also going to install my BitLocker options. And I'm going to take branch cache, client for FS. We're going to just go ahead and click all of these right here. Take the additional features, group policy management console, the ink, internet printing. And I think that's all I'm going to take on that one. I'm going to go ahead and hit Next. Hit Next again. And here it just comes up and asks me for the different roles within IIS that I want to make sure I support. We don't need to make any changes here because we've already installed the IIS options. I'm going to hit Next. Now it's going to ask me for WDS. And this is because it's a subcomponent of one of the other features that we selected. I'm just going to go ahead and hit Next here. I'm going to go ahead and take the defaults here of both a deployment and a transport server. What a WDS server does for us is it basically allows you to push out images via network to different machines. So we're going to go ahead and hit Next here and just hit Install. And we're going to let the hamsters run around the wheel on this one for a few minutes. So we'll come back as soon as it's done installing. Now you'll notice after it's done installing all of those features, it does tell me that it's pending a reboot. So we're going to hit Closed. And we're just going to simply come over to our Start button, right-click on it, select Shutdown or Sign Out, and do a restart. And again, we're going to give it a reason. We're just going to again say it's Other. It's not important right now. And we'll let this bad boy restart. Okay, we're again going to log in. I've got to do my login a little differently than you guys. Okay, so the next feature we're going to install, we'll be doing this both on the Server 2012 box as well as the 08 box, is a service that we use for managing network devices or managing network nodes. We refer to it as the SNMP service. So I'm going to come here into my Add Roles or Features. Again, I could also come up here to the Manage section and select Add Roles and Features. And I'm going to again run through my 4-hour wizard here. I'm going to continue through the server selections. It's just this server. The roles, it's not a role, it's a feature I'm going to turn on. So I'm going to come here to features. And by the way, I don't know if you know this or not, but you can just, at the beginning of this, you can just click on features and it'll take you right down to that section. You're like, where were you a half hour ago, Dale? And I'm going to select here to install my SNMP service. It tells me that I need to install some additional tools. I'll hit add the features. And then I'm just going to select next, hit install. Tells me here that it's successfully installed. I'll hit close. Notice here under my action flag, I have that it's successfully installed, so I can get rid of that. And then I'm going to come into the services. Now that I've installed it, I want to make sure my services are running. So I'm going to come to Tools and select Services. And I'm a big fan of sorting by startup type, so I can see all the services that have to start automatically. I just like scrolling through here, making sure that they're all up and running. The ones that, again, that are automatically delay, or they may be also set up to be a trigger start, you don't need to make sure that those are running. So since those are all running okay, I'm good there. But I do want to pay special attention to the service that we just installed, which was, again, was our SNMP service. I'm going to right-click on it and go to the properties for that service. And under the security tab, I'm going to set what we refer to as the community name. And we're going to set this up as the defaults. So I'm going to select that I'm going to create a new community name and rights. It's going to be set up as read-only, and the community name, this is very generic here, or default. Oh, it's public. I'm going to hit add. And then I'm going to select the option down here to accept SNMP packets from any host. The default, you noticed, was to accept only from the following host that you list. That is a much more secure mechanism or setting that you can set up. It's a much better configuration. But again, our goal here is not to lock down the machine. We're to learn different vulnerabilities that could exist. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. We'll close that down. So another thing that we need to do here is we need to set the IP address for this particular machine. The default for it, if I come here and look at the local server, you'll notice here that the IP address is it's being assigned by a DHCP. Well, I don't have a DHCP server. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this link. It takes me to my network adapter. I'm going to right-click on it, go to Properties, and then I'm going to scroll down here to where it says Internet Protocol version 4 or TCP/IP v4. Just double-click on that, and that opens up your IP address info. I'm going to not obtain automatically because I don't have a DHCP server out there, but I'm going to go through and select to use the following IP address. And the IP address that I'm going to use is going to be, and you can use any range that you want as well. Again, I'm going to do this so it's easy for me. If you follow along with me, then things will make sense when we're trying to identify machines by IPs, because very seldom do we actually do it by the actual DNS name. Typically, we're hitting it by IP. So this particular one, I'm going to call it I'm going to give it the IP address of 192.168, and I'm going to go with 0.10. And the subnet mask, I'll leave at the 22255 because I'm not going out onto the internet to anywhere. I don't need to worry about a default gateway. And for the DNS server, I'm going to put in its own IP address because we will install DNS on this machine. So I'm going to put in here a loopback address, which I could technically type in the 192 address that's listed up there as my IP, or I can use a 127.0.0.1 address, which means look at myself for DNS. Now again, I don't have DNS installed on this machine at this point, and that's okay. We might play around with that a little bit later. I'm just setting this up ahead of time. I'm going to hit OK and close that back down. Another feature that we're going to want to install, I do have to select the server name, then I come to Features, is the Telnet client. So I'm going to scroll down here, and you could have selected this earlier as well. I'm just trying to compartmentalize as much as I can for you. And I'm going to go ahead and select Next. Tells me I need to restart it, or if I need to restart it, I don't need to for the installation of the Telnet client. I'm just going to hit Install. Okay, after that's done being installed, I'm going to go ahead and hit Closed. And the next thing we want to do on this particular machine is to disable something that's enabled by default. And again, guys, I understand you may be thinking I would never do this. Trust me, you're going to come into environments, or you may be around environments where somebody has done some of these settings to make things easier for them. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to go through and remove the password complexity. And we'll be doing this on all the hosts, and we'll be doing this both on the host and the guest operating systems. So let me show you while we're here on the Server 2012 box. I'm going to come up here to my tools, and under my tools, I'm going to come down to under my administrative tools. I'm going to come down to where it says local security policy and open up the console for that. And inside the local policy, I'm going to open up my account policies. Under my password policy settings, I'm going to highlight it. And you'll notice here that the default is the password must meet complexity requirements. So I'm going to disable this. Now, the default again is enabled, which means our passwords have to comply to the following options. They have to adhere to at least 3 of the 4, and that is uppercase, lowercase, a number, and a special symbol. And that's why when we did the installation of the server, we did that funky password just so that we would adhere, because that's the default. But we're going to disable this because we may have in our demos coming in the ability for users to create whatever password they'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Notice that that's been disabled. Now this will also require a restart of this machine. So after we're done setting the local security policy, the next thing we're going to do is, and we'll do this again on each machine, and I'll have these detailed steps both in the demo.zip file as well as I'm going to demo this on each of the machines, but we're going to create user accounts. And these user accounts are going to be the same account on every single machine. So I'm going to come over here to my tools, and under my tools, I'm going to come into my computer management. I'm then going to come over here to where it says local users and groups. I'm going to create some local users. So I'm going to come down here to users. Notice I have the administrator account as well as the guest account. I'm just going to simply right click and select I'd like to create a new user. And for the first user, you can call these usernames anything you want, but if you follow my instructions here, then when we do the demos, you'll understand what we're trying to accomplish. So, and here comes my superhero nerdiness. So let's see, my first username is going to be Bruce Wayne. Oh, excuse me, it's his login name, which would be B. Wayne. His full name will be Bruce Wayne. And we're going to give him a password. And the password I'm going to give him is going to be something really simple. It's going to be Batman, all lowercase. And he doesn't have to change it on the next login. I'm going to select Create. And now I'm going to create another one, and we'll say this is, let's just go with, I'm going to pick a name here out of the blue, D. Grayson. And that's Dick Grayson. And his password is going to be, let's pick a bird here, Robin. Now, I know these aren't difficult passwords, but that's the point. I'm going to hit Create. We'll create another one here. This one we'll call their login name H. Jordan. And that would be Hal Jordan. And let's just say his password is green. Oh, and I forgot to do Dick Grayson doesn't have to change. So make sure you select that they don't have to change on the next login. We'll go back and fix Dick Grayson's here in just a second. And let's create another one, and we'll do C. Kent. And we'll just say his name, I don't know, this is Clark Kent. And his password is super, I guess. I'm just making these up, guys. And I'm going to select, again, that his password doesn't have to change. We'll hit Create. Then we'll close this. I'm going to go back in here real fast since I goofed up. Hopefully you didn't goof up, but you may have on Dick Grayson's account. I'm just going to right-click on his account, go to Properties, and just deselect and hit OK. Now, whatever accounts or whatever username and passwords you use here, make a note of those because you're going to create the same accounts on each one of the machines in the environment. We're not going to be dealing with a domain controller. In the future, we might. This is just setting up some basic accounts. Okay, a couple other things that we're going to want to do here is first we're going to turn off the old Windows firewall. And we can do this a couple different ways. We just come down here to the Start button, click on it, and just start typing in the word firewall. And I'm going to do not open the one with advanced security. It's going to take you someplace you don't necessarily need to go right now because we just need to turn this off. I'm just going to select the Windows Firewall. Again, this is going to be a step that we do on every single machine. It's kind of funny that we talk about turning off the firewall, and normally you would think, ooh, that's a bad thing, and yet I don't know how many times I teach a class when the firewall comes up as a point of subject, majority of IT guys actually have group policies that push out that turn this thing off. And it's because it creates a hassle for them, they think, but that's okay. We'll let them do that. I'm going to come in here and select to turn off the turn the Windows Firewall on or off, and just select to turn it off for both. This will also allow the machine to respond to ping requests. I could actually go through and open up some ports through the advanced settings, so it would respond to an ICMP. But we're just going to make things very, very simplistic here so that we can get the theory and the concepts down. I'm going to hit OK. And now I'm going to see a lot of red here, and that's okay. And the last thing I'm going to do is I think I want to check to make sure that I don't have any screensavers, but on a server I'm not going to have them by default because, yeah, they shouldn't be turned on. Again, this is going to be something we'll check on every single machine. We know that the desktop platforms, the screensaver will be active, and so you're just going to want to make sure that we turn those off as well. But again, when we get to the setup of those machines, I'll review that with you. So that gets us a starting point here for our Server 2012 R2 box. What we want to do now is we're going to move on to installing our next one, and in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and shut this machine down. So I'm just going to come down here to the Start menu. I'm going to right-click on it, select the Shutdown option, and just select to please shut this bad boy down. I'm going to go ahead and select it's being shut down for other, and hit OK. I have my console still open here. We'll go ahead and close that. Okay, and that's how you set up the 2012 R2 box.